Hello, welcome to the Free Bin, the Toledo, Oregon Public Libraries podcast. I'm Harrison,
and I'm Cindy.
And today we are we're jumping into something. I'm going in cold, and this should be a really interesting episode.
I think so.
Sometimes we talk about books, we talk about movies, we talk about cultural works. It's a little less often that we talk about a personal story that you're not going to find on your library shelves.
That's right.
Cindy has something special prepared for us today.
Yeah. So, but before we get into that, I do want to talk about some upcoming things that are happening at the library.
Yes.
So don't forget, if you have a tiny art kit out and haven't turned it in, it is due Tuesday by the end of day, Tuesday, April 15th. And we are not going to take late entries. We have gotten quite a bit back from people. If you really cannot get to us today, well, after today, because this is being taped on Saturday, if you can't get to us on Tuesday, then call us and tell us that, because we will take it if you're done. But if you walk in on Wednesday morning and say, here it is, we're going to say, sorry, nope.
We got a deadline.
We had a deadline.
Is the deadline.
Because we've got to prepare them for the show. We've got to do a lot of stuff. And the show opens on April 26th during the garden swap. And it's going to be chaotic. And so we want to get all that art stuff done prior to the garden swap.
Yeah.
So hard and fast rule, April 15th, got to be turned in. Speaking of that, the garden swap is happening April 26th from 10 to 3 at the library. There'll be things inside. There'll be things in the backyard. If it rains, bring your raincoat and an umbrella, because I don't know where we're going to go, but we'll try. We're really counting on sunny weather, or at least not raining weather. Everybody does their little rain dance. So
the whole property is going to be active during that event. We've got the back lawn, we've got the inside. So we've got some. We're wrangling some additional parking as well in case it gets busy. Cindy has been out making deals, not begging,
just
arranging.
I've been arranging things. So there will be additional parking if you come by at 11 and it is full up. There's a couple different additional places you can park. Head Start across the street, and then just down the street a block is Abundant Life Assemblies of God. They have graciously opened their parking lot to us, so we are excited about that partnership. You can come and have a garden tour in our community garden center. You can do Arbor Day crafts with your kids. We're doing chalk art on the back wall of the where the library is. We've got free compost down at the garden site. We've got paper towels. We've got seeds in our seed library. You can come and vote for your People's Choice Award for tiny art. There's free swimming from 3 to 5 at the pool. There's snow cones. There's snow cones. There's the Yaquina Fiber Arts Guild is going to have a really cool project for kids on the stage. And then in the afternoon, for your listening enjoyment, the Slugs are coming, the Seaside Literacy Ukulele Group. They'll be playing. They'll have their bucket out for donations to the Seaside Literacy Center in Walport. So be sure that you put this on your calendar. It's going to be so much fun.
It's going to be great.
We're hoping for a big crowd.
Yeah.
All righty. I think that's it. So I brought our beverage for the day. I'm going to let Harrison open it because my wrist is not working right.
It's made in Mexico. It's a pale, cloudy, sort of greenish, faintly greenish hue. Looks like Squirt. The liquid itself looks a lot like Squirt. Peña Fiel. Limeade, naturally and artificially.
So I am a little bit addicted to the Peña Fiel pineapple.
Oh.
And I've never tried the lime. So I thought, what the heck, let's try the lime.
Mineral water beverage.
Yeah. So naturally and artificially sweetened. I have no idea how much sugar's in there. I chose not to look.
57 grams of sugar in the whole bottle. And this is a 20.3 ounce bottle. Contains 1% juice.
So it's not necessarily good for you, right?
It's 1% good for you. Oh, that's a good sound.
So we're going to try it out here. I really do. I mean, these are hard to find. They have them at Safeway in Newport, and occasionally they'll have them at the market here in Toledo. So you just gotta look for them.
It's real fizzy.
It smells good. Okay.
Oh,
I like that.
Yeah,
that's good.
It's nice.
Lime is always really refreshing. It'd be really good with like some cherry flavor in it, like a cherry limeade.
Yeah, you could mix stuff into this real good.
It is really fizzy, and I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, it is a little sour, though. It kind of made me go, ooh. But I still like it.
I like it, too. Where did you find this one?
This one I found at Safeway.
Okay.
And, the nice thing about them is they're not, if you go to get a can of pop somewhere and you just want one can or one bottle, you're paying like $2 or $2.50. These are like $1.25.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. They're nice. But the pineapple's so good.
Cool. Highly recommended.
Yes, I do. That's good. Okay. So like Harrison said, there's a lot of times when we don't do, we don't really talk about like bring in personal stories or family stories, but this one I came across at my house like a year ago. My dad passed away about 4 or 5 years ago now, and at that time he had cleaned out a lot of his pictures and a lot of his stuff because he knew he was terminal, and so he had written this particular thing I'm going to read. I have no idea when he wrote it. But it's written, if you could see it, it's written on a typewriter. That's how old it is.
Yeah.
Not a word processor. He wrote it on a typewriter because there's a lot of mistakes, and then you can see where he crossed them off, and stuff. But just for a little backstory, my dad was born in 1932. He was too young for World War II. He was too old for Vietnam. He was in his 20s during the Korean War. And this is a story about his time spent in the Air Force at the end of the Korean War. And so it got me thinking, because we have a lot of books in our library about people who have gone through conflicts, through World War II or World War I, Vietnam. People write about their experiences, usually in combat. My dad was not in combat, but his role in the effort at the end of the Korean War was really important. And he was a young man. He was in his early 20s. And, back in 1952. And he never, he talked about it because I don't think there was any like PTSD kinds of things with him. He has more PTSD, I think, from being a policeman for 10 years than he did ever for being in the Air Force. But I think you'll get the gist of it. I'm going to read it exactly like he typed it.
Yeah.
Because it's his voice. And I was reading it to practice a little bit, and honestly, it's like, oh, that's my dad. That's how my dad talked, And, but he had some interesting experiences. I'm going to add a little bit in it so you'll figure out who the people are in this, because there's a couple, just to point out, when he mentions David, that's my older brother. And when he mentions Chet, that's his older brother. So my dad came from one of those really, his mom married, had 3 kids, and then 11 years later had 3 more. And my dad was in the second family so his brothers were all at least 11 years older than him. And so he mentions Chet in here because he was a tank commander in World War II. And so there's a mention of that. And then at the end, you'll hear about Shirley, and that's my mom. So just so you know.
Cool.
Okay. Are you ready for the story to start?
Are ready.
Okay. This is how he wrote. I'm leaving out the little things. He notated paragraphs, which I don't understand.
I saw that. That's cool.
I'm not sure why. He has a whole list of things here, but it may be because of the way that he typed it up at one point. But you'll find out well, anyway, we'll just get started. My life as an airman, 1952 to 1956. Charles L. Conlee. Military years, April 17th, 1952 to March 30th, 1956. I was sworn in Portland on April 17th, 1952. A physical followed, and I was placed on a train to California, Parks Air Force Base in Hayward, California. I was in boot camp there for 7 weeks. Classes in military stuff, rifle range where I made expert with the 30-aught M1 carbine, like the one you have that I gave to David. So David was my brother. I don't know where the gun is, but David apparently has it. I got my nose bent in a football game during PE time. Took 2 hours to stop the bleeding, which included a trip to the infirmary to get it cauterized. At the end of the 7 weeks, I got a stripe, Airman 3rd Class, A3C. Now, my dad had a broken nose. He never got it fixed, so he always had a bent nose. I shipped out of Harlingen, Texas. I shipped out to Harlingen, Texas in a newly opened base that trained navigators for airplanes. I had prior knowledge of auto mechanics, and so I didn't go to school for training. The base had previously been a training base for airmen and was closed after World War II. It was opened a few months before I got there. We sat around a half day and worked a half day. We, other mechanics, walked the flight lines to pick up rocks or scorpions or whatever. It was hot. The lowest temperature was 80 degrees, and that was at night. I worked in a skating rink in the evenings, renting skates and selling pop. This was June to October. In October, I transferred to Otis Air Force Base on Cape Cod, Massachusetts. There, I was a preventative line maintenance person. I did tune-ups, governor settings on the aircraft tugs, brakes, etc. On weekends, we, friends, would go to Buzzards Bay to a skating rink. Had fun. Once in a while, we would go into Boston, 60 miles away, to see the sights, see a movie, anything to get away from the base. During my time there, the squadron captain needed a company clerk. I was moved into that office and became Radar Riley for the next 6 months. So if you don't know who Radar Riley is, then you need to watch MASH.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's funny because this is at the same time that Radar Riley was a company clerk, during the Korean War. In October 1953, I was transferred to Grenier Air Force Base at Manchester, New Hampshire. I was scheduled to be sent to the top end of Labrador to a new AC&W radio site. This was when the government was building early warning radar sites across the top of Canada. They also built one on top of Mount Hebo on the Oregon coast, just out of Hebo, Oregon. And then he put in parentheses, find it on a map. Just really like my dad. Just find it. I was redlined from shipping out to Labrador because of persistent tonsillitis. Yeah, I really didn't want to go where it snows 15 feet deep and we would be snowed in for at least 3 months a year. I stayed at Grenier Air Force Base for about 7 months. I, a captain, and a staff sergeant were the whole unit. I did the daily morning report on how many people we had, etc., and sent it to Syracuse, New York, to the Eastern Air Defense Force headquarters. We nominally worked half days and then went home. In their case, and in mine, I went to the transient officers' barrack where I was the only one living there. I shoveled snow, skated on a frozen parking lot that was flooded, I found out what 30 below zero felt like for weeks. The drinking fountain in the barracks hall froze solid. It was a cold winter. I also got promoted to corporal A2C while there. Okay, so I knew he'd been in New Hampshire, but I didn't know he was the only guy living in the barracks there.
That must be interesting.
I know. Like, what a weird existence.
Following his instructions, I did find Hebo on a map.
Yeah.
Because I know I've seen it. I know I've been through it, but I couldn't place where it was. And it's between between Pacific City and Tillamook on 101.
Yeah, it's by, I looked it up on a map too, which goes to show you I still do what my dad tells me.
I'm doing what your dad tells
That's right. Yeah, everybody did what my dad told them. Okay. So in the late spring of 1954, I was transferred to Bangor, Maine. I was assigned to be a company clerk at the Ground Observer Corps unit there. We worked in an old brick schoolhouse on a hill. In one classroom, we had a large table shaped like Maine, like the state of Maine, about 20 feet long and 15 feet wide. It had the towns and such painted on it. The unit manned phones 24/7 to receive calls from observers in the field. These were volunteers that took shifts and watched for planes flying by. They would call the center, and we had plane markers that we moved across the map table. We didn't have any unidentified planes that we had to call the fighters up for, at least while I was there. It was beautiful in the spring and summer I was there. I lived off base and rented a room from an older lady. I ate in a restaurant, and for this I got off-base rations and quarters allotment, about $200 a month, which in 1954 was a living wage, plus my $78 a month in military pay. I skated a lot at an amusement park near there. I learned to dance skate and got fairly good at it. I went to some of the summer stock plays and got to see Margaret Truman perform and sing. Not very good. Poor Margaret. She didn't last long as she was just writing on President Truman's name. So I read that and went, oh, poor Margaret.
No.
But I had to laugh because there's a roller rink that I think is still open in Corvallis called Lake Park Roller Rink. And when I was a kid, we went there every weekend because my dad loved to skate. And now I know why. He was bored, silly, decided to go learn how to skate.
Was he a flashy skater?
He could skate backwards and he could twirl and he could, I learned to roller skate, but I can't ice skate. I just can't. But my dad could do both, and he did both well, you know.
I feel like I always did a little bit better on ice skates than roller skates.
Yeah.
Same thing with a snowboard versus a skateboard.
Yeah.
The wheels throw me off. But growing up in Florida, I didn't have a whole lot of opportunity to ice skate other than when we had a minor league hockey team for a
or
little
snowboard, I would imagine.
Zero opportunity for snowboarding in Tallahassee, Florida.
Yeah, I would think so.
At the time. I don't know what they got there. I don't think they've got one of those Dubai things there.
No.
You go inside and snowboard.
We moved to Illinois, and of course, Illinois is flat. And the first time we were driving down from Wisconsin, my son looked out the window and he's like, "Look, it's Christmas Mountain." I think that was the name of it. Maybe I can go there. It's Christmas Mountain. We looked over it. They were creating their own snow, blowing it up onto the mountain. And so we decided probably not.
Yeah, when I was in high school, one of my friends tried to do a pretty big jump off of a retaining wall behind a chicken, and he ended up shattering his leg. And the manager of the I won't say which I don't know if it's still there. Manager of the came out and he thought he was going to get help, but he just told him to leave the property so that he would get sued.
Oh, the sympathy. So much sympathy in the Popeye's chicken.
So, sorry. Anyway, back to the story.
We digress. Okay. So anyway, so he got to do a lot of things when he was there. He also, when he was in New Hampshire and in Maine, he would go to, I know that he went several times to New York City. I think he went to see the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. He had relatives that lived there. Anyway, then in September, so this is September like 1954, I think. Then in September, I got the call. A voice from EADF, Syracuse, calling, asking if my shot record was up to date. No, it wasn't, so I went out to the Air Force Base at Bangor and got it caught up. I was scheduled for 30 days leave and then report to San Francisco for shipment to Korea. The war was over, but military people in Korea lived in tents and muds and ate out of mess kits, etc. Not my idea of fun. After about a month of playing around Corvallis, visiting old friends, etc., I reported to San Francisco. I sailed out of the Golden Gate on the USS Meigs, a troop transport that my brother Chet came home from Europe on after World War II. 11 days of watching others get seasick while I ate all I wanted and never got sick at all. We laid around in the compartments, which had bunks about 6 high with 24 inches between the next one up. 5,000 of us all going to Korea. My orders read Seoul, Korea. We docked in Yokosuka, a major port not too far from Tokyo, and while we were walking off the ship, we would get checked off a shipping list. I was told to go stand over there, pointing to a spot 30 or so feet away. There were 6 of us standing there when the ship was empty and the others were loaded on buses and ultimately flown to Korea. We couldn't figure out why we were signaled out to stay in the spot. A sergeant picked us up and took us to Yamato Air Force Base, a dismal-looking block square ex-prison of the Japanese. It was a transfer base for airmen shipping back to the States after serving their year in Korea. Lucky me. So he had told the story when we would talk about this. He told the story that the guy, the sergeant, as they were getting off the ship, would say, "Can you type?" And my dad said, "Well, yeah." And so he'd say, "Go stand over there." That's my dad's story. It's not in this, but that's what he would say, is that he was singled out because of his typing skills. I was now in the 6,000th Personnel Processing Squadron. From October 1954 to March 1956, this was my new home. I was assigned to check prisoners in and out of their room, and this was next to an office with a bunk, a phone, a desk, and a few chairs. It was upstairs and in a corner of the building overlooking the fence. The prisoners were going back to the States for bad conduct, undesirable conduct type discharges. They couldn't leave the base, but did have the run of the base. I worked every other day from 4:30 p.m. to 7:30 a.m. I read a lot of books in the 3 months we were there. Then we moved into a brand new base just about a quarter mile from Tachikawa Air Force Base. All new, nice base barracks. I was assigned to the duty section. We moved people from place to place, processing them for shipment home, either on a baby flat top called the Windham Bay, made in Vancouver by Kaiser, or by plane for the sergeants. Officers didn't come through this base. They all flew home. And that's an important thing to remember. My dad was not an officer, but keep that in mind for later.
Okay. Duly noted.
I worked in the duty section, 5 people and a sergeant, for about 6 months. We marched groups of people, usually 50 in a group, to various places, like to customs, where their duffel bags and stuff would be checked, to the medical section for VD and malaria checks. About this time, I was promoted to sergeant and put in charge of the section. I got to pull officer of the day duty sometimes on weekends, wear an armband like I was really someone in charge of something, and walk around looking important. Each day, we would get a list of those to ship out that day, line them up in units of 50, march them to the buses that hauled them off to the port of Yokosuka. The ship crew would take over and put them on the ship. My job was done when the last bus drove out the gate. In my off times, a group of us would go to Tokyo and see the sights. The zoo was a neat place, comparable to Portland's. The parks were very nice. Some sections of town had theaters that were showing fairly new movies, with Japanese subtitles down the sides, but were in English, so we understood them. Some of the shows were the Japanese samurai plays, with the guys wailing away with fake swords. The palace grounds were beautiful, but off limits to GIs. They had a moat around them and guard shacks by the entries.
That's a great time and place to go to the movies. There are some wonderful films, some Kurosawa movies, I think, coming out at that time.
Yeah. I know. It just made me laugh. They were just whacking each other randomly with swords. Well, okay. In March of 1956, I went to customs and got a couple of tags to put on my duffel bag and a crate of stuff I shipped home by boat. Got passed by the medics and okayed to go home. I signed up. Okay, this is the important thing. I signed up to be flown out of the Haneda airport, Tokyo's main airport. So my dad told me later that he knew all the ins and outs of how to get himself on an airplane and not a troop transport. And he was going to fly home. He wasn't going to ride a ship home. So he made himself, he kind of wrote his own ticket to go home. I flew home on a Super Constellation run by the Navy. There were about 3 enlisted men and 100 officers. I sat in the last row of seats with the 2 other airmen and chatted with the Navy's stewards, which were female. We flew to Midway Island, landed about midnight for refueling and supper and breakfast for all. There were lots of albatrosses sitting around under the trees, called goonie birds, for their lousy landings and takeoffs. When flying, they are most graceful. We flew on to Hawaii, landed at Hickam Field for customs check from all. As I had custom tags on my stuff, I was not checked. On to the U.S., a fantastic sight at midnight coming in over the Golden Gate Bridge with the city lights all laid out below. We landed at Mather Field in Sacramento. So my dad was very, very loyal to my mother, and I don't want to ever disparage that. He loved my mom, but he was also kind of a flirt. And he was a little bit of a player when he was younger, and he told me that. So, I mean, I'm not making anything up. And so when I read this about him, chatting up the Navy stewards, I'm like, of course they're girls. Of course they are. The 3 of us enlisted airmen were bussed into Parks Air Force Base for discharge. As this unit that operated Parks was a division of the unit I was in Japan, I had sent a lot of the people working there home from Japan. I knew most of them in the separate sections. I went to the dining hall for chow, and the first time, and about gagged. We ate very well in Japan. In the U.S., the chow was not so good. I ate in the snack bar for the rest of my time there. It took 4 days to process and leave. I walked out of the main gate and stuck out my thumb. The first car by picked me up and took me north of San Francisco. The next ride took me to Northern California, and the next, a logging truck to Eugene, Oregon. He let me out on 99W. At Eugene, and the next car by a new Oldsmobile convertible took me to Corvallis and out to my mom's house. This was a long day of riding. I couldn't buy a meal or spend a dime. The people I was with purchased everything and thanked me for the privilege. I was home in one piece. I bought a 4-year-old 1952 Oldsmobile Super 88, black top, red bottom, a neat car. I had saved enough to get it. I then got a job with the Firestone tire recapper and caught up with Shirley. That's my mom. I had been sending letters and tapes to her back to me for a year and a half. We were engaged on May 3rd and married on August 5th, 1956. End of that portion of my life, Charles Conlee. My mom and dad were married 51 years before my mom passed away.
Wow.
And they talked about, I think somewhere in memorabilia of probably at my house, we've got some of the tapes that they sent back and forth. I don't know that you could play them on anything now. They were reel to reel. Probably super fragile. Yeah. Super fragile. I'm not sure I want to hear them. You don't want to
risk damaging them in the transfer.
But my dad was a car guy. He worked a lot of odd jobs. They got married in August 56. My sister was born probably a year or so later. And, it always makes me laugh because they really didn't. When I got engaged to get married, my dad was like, well, I don't really want you to be engaged very long. Well, he waited 2 months to ask my mom to marry him. And then they were engaged from, May to August. So, but they were older and ready to be married. But I just thought in reading this, and thanks for indulging me, because it's just it's kind of a snapshot of a different kind of military service.
And it's such an insight into the time and place and what he was doing in general in his life at the time. It's really cool. And like, on a broader scale, I sometimes feel like so much cultural attention gets put on the Second World War and the Vietnam conflict as well. And sometimes outside of MASH, it's almost like that generation of during the Korean War doesn't draw as much. Right. Like we don't listen as much about that, I guess. And apart from that, on the smaller scale, it's how many people had a similar experience of just regular service without any sort of like nothing like grand historically pivoted on this one experience, but it was part of the whole picture that is made of so many people living their lives, and this is something that happened during their lives. And, I don't know if I'm phrasing that right, but it's important, and it's not often that we sit down to listen to these stories, which are what history is made of.
Right. And I think, like what you said about it's not like it wasn't a pivotal event, but to the guys who were coming out of Korea and going home, my dad's job was necessary to get them home. So I'm sure they were grateful that there was some little company clerk who was writing their ticket to get home. And, my dad's personality is very, very laid back. He was very chill. I don't know what my siblings would say, but I never saw him really, really get angry. He's just very, very cool and calm and collected. Like I said before, he was a police officer for 10 years in the city of Corvallis. And, he just was one of those guys that lived his life with the desire to help people. He had a great faith in God, and he just wanted to do his best. He helped his neighbors when he got cancer. There were so many people who were like, your dad did this for me. Your dad. And I would, we talked about him dying. I mean, when we finally posted on Facebook, cause it was during COVID. So we didn't have a funeral. We just had our family together. So many people from his life. Your dad did this for me. And one guy I remember saying, your dad gave me a job that supported my family. My dad worked for the city of Portland for a lot of years. And the neighbor across the street, your dad built me a handicap ramp so that I could get into my house. I mean, it's those little things that he did that added up to a lot of really big things. And he just was he would see a problem and he would fix it. I mean, that's how he ran his life.
And you mentioned that part about him being told to stand in a certain place.
Right.
And in his telling, he doesn't mention what it was, but you recalled that it's because he had this necessary skill that was put out there, but he left it out of his own, the record he left when he typed this up, he left his own contribution or his skill out of that story, which then raises the question of how much was he doing that he felt like, he wasn't going to make a big deal out of or something. Yeah. And I wonder if between the lines of this story, how many little or big things was he doing for people around him that he just didn't want to.
Right. One of the things he did not mention in this is that he was named Airman of the Year when he was in Japan, and he got a trip to Tokyo or to Hong Kong.
Wow.
It was like, you won a trip to Hong Kong and 3 days leave, and it's funny because my dad for years and years was a photographer. He loved taking pictures but it all started with his trip to Hong Kong. He bought his first Nikon camera in Hong Kong, and he bought 2 custom tailored suits to bring home, and he got married in one of them,
Wow.
And so it's just really, to me, obviously it is, my dad was a great guy, and I miss him, and I loved him. I love him. He was humble. He worked after my mom's passing because of what hospice had done for her. He worked for hospice and helped people, and he was a carpenter. So he fixed things, and up until he was in his 80s, he built decks for people. I mean, he just was he just never was good at sitting still. And lots of skills he taught me. I mean, I look back on the things he taught me. He taught me how to change a tire on a car because he never wanted, me to be stranded somewhere. Just a guy living his life. Mm-hmm. How many guys are out there doing that? Mm-hmm. We know them. We see them all the time.
We know them.
They come in, they check out their books, they live their life. They donate their time. They donate their money. We should all be like that, mm-hmm. just chugging along, living our lives, doing the best we can with what we have. Mm-hmm. But one funny story about the library, I do have to tell this. So when my dad retired, they were both prolific readers, my mom and dad. I never saw them without a stack of books from the library. I went to the library from the time I was tiny. It was just a really important thing. And he decided when he was retired that he was going to start in the section A in fiction and read one book of every author throughout the entire library.
It's ambitious.
And I think he made it to Q.
Wow.
before he stopped doing that. But it just made me laugh because he would go in and the librarians all knew him, just like you and I know people mm-hmm. who come in every week, and he would come in and he would pick his one book from A, this guy, now we're reading this guy. And, but that's the kind of guy he was. And then eventually, he had to stop a little bit, but, yeah, just a story about a guy.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So thanks for letting me indulge in this. I'm going to send the link to my sister, my brother, and so they can hear it. So
thank you for introducing us to your dad today.
Yeah. He's a pretty cool guy.
I like him.
You would have liked him.
Awesome. All right. Well, we will talk to you all next week. And
yes. I don't know what about yet.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. Thank you. Have a good one. Bye. The Free Bin is a production of the Toledo Public Library, which is part of the Lincoln County Library District in beautiful Lincoln County, Oregon. Writing by Harrison Baker, Cindy Balek, and Denise Marsh. Original music and editing by Harrison Baker. That's me. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect those of any organizations they represent. Good night.